workers, the support staff, members of the public on the platform, media, and our guest today, National Treasury. Honorable members, over the past few months, we've been busy with the Appropriation Bill, 2023 Appropriations Bill, and we had a number of departments appearing before the committee, and also members of the public making their comments, their inputs as far as the Appropriations Bill is concerned. Today, we are meeting National Treasury. As you would know, a lot of issues which were raised, they would need the response from National Treasury. So we're having National Treasury today appearing before us. National Treasury will indicate who's leading the delegation or who's in the delegation, and so they'll be commenting on the inputs made on the Appropriations Bill. They are also going to be making a presentation on the fourth quarter expenditure report 22-23. So those are the things that they will be dealing with. Let me check who's on the platform, National Treasury. Let us know what's it, Dr. Mampo. Dr. Mampo, is it you?
Good morning, Chairperson. Yes, it's me who will be leading the delegation.
Good morning, long time.
Good morning, Chair.
Okay, so you know how we do it. I think we'll give you 1 hour to deal with all your presentations, and then, as you know, then the oral members will still raise a thing or two. They'll come in, and then we'll move to the next agenda item. Dr. Mampo, please come in.
Chair, before that, apologies.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Let's apologies.
Yeah, good morning once again, Honorable Chair and Honorable members. We've got an apology from Honorable Kwang Kwang. That is the only apology that we have for this morning. Thank you.
Yes, and Honorable Matafa is also tendering his apology. He'll be leaving to join another meeting at 10. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Mampo, go.
Thank you, Chair. No, Mshinti laptop manje is showing me closed this morning. Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members. I just want to make sure the Zoom is right.
Yes. Yeah, we are fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Now I must switch on my camera. Yeah. No. Anyways, good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. Thank you so much, Chair, for providing us this opportunity to respond to the issues that were raised by the committee, especially in the different public hearings. Chairperson, today I brought the full team, and the different chief directors will be responding specifically to the issues that were raised in their spaces. But what I wanted to do first was I wanted to just touch on the general cross-cutting issues that were raised. And the first one, Chairperson, that came across very strongly is the issue of corruption and what is government going to do to address corruption. And I think the response there basically is that noting that we need to deal with corruption and noting that we having pressure from the FATF recommendations. I think from the Treasury side, what we did was we allocated additional funding to the security sector or the security cluster just to capacitate some of the entities that deal with corruption, and in hoping that they will be capacitated and then deal or investigate more and finalize some of these cases that they have. What we also did then was, coming from the FATF recommendations, is that we have been working with the cluster just to ensure that what they need assistance from Treasury on, that assistance is provided. And the fact that we have to report back to FATF means that the different departments or the different entities then are accountable and have to show what they have been doing to deal with some of these corruption cases that they have. The other theme, Chairperson, that was coming across quite strongly was the theme on additional funding for the SRD grant, additional funding for the presidential employment interventions and other funding requests. I think, Chairperson, we note the funding requests, we note the proposals, and most of these proposals, we will be taking them to the budgeting process, and will be dealt with through the budget process. So, Chairperson and honorable members, when I mean the budget process, is that the recommendations from the committee will be presented between the departments, of course, and then the recommendations there will then be presented to cabinet. So those recommendations are not ignored, Chairperson. I want to assure you we will definitely take through these recommendations through to the budgeting process. And I think another cross-cutting theme, Chairperson, that was picked up is the accountability by different departments, accountability by different spheres of government, accountability by different arms of state. So basically, we note the recommendation. Of course, we support the recommendations, and where National Treasury has to intervene, we will definitely ensure that we support the departments to ensure that they can be accountable for some of the fundings that, or the spending that they would have taken as a department. Chairperson, can I ask Marumo and the Chief Directors then to deal specifically with the recommendations and some of the questions that are directly in their scope of work? Marumo, are you there?
Thanks, Mampo, and good morning to the chairperson and to the members of the committee. I'm trying to put on my video. I'm not sure if I'm visible, Chair. You will advise me. I will deal with the questions that relates to remunerations and headcounts, and the first one was about the need for a single wage regime and collective bargaining for the public sector as a whole. And as the National Treasury, we are in an agreement with this suggestion, but I think the issue there, it's not more about bringing all these institutions into a one bargaining council, but more about the alignment of the mandating processes between all these different bargaining council. I mean, to ensure that there is consistency in the manner in which we issue mandates and the manner in which these mandates are implemented and applied by the negotiators in the public service. And this, we think, it will ensure fairness as well as equity. I mean, in the manner in which salary increases are granted in the space. So currently, I mean, there is work that is currently underway, led by the DPSA, to try and review the entire public sector remuneration framework, and with the aim of trying to introduce some sort of a single framework, especially for public entities that relies solely on your government transfers. I mean, to ensure that the remuneration regime in that space is aligned to the remuneration policy in the public service and in the local government space. So we are in an agreement with this. I think work is currently happening. And I must say that I don't think this is something, Honorable Chair, that will be able to achieve in a shorter period. I mean, this is more a medium to a long-term project. I mean, because there are some of the legal complexities that needs to be explored and understood, and probably even change some of the legislation, because currently remuneration practices in public entities are governed by their founding legislations, and I mean, and those, I mean, will probably also need to change. So I think this is one of the initiatives that, I mean, we are looking at currently in the medium and in the medium to longer term, to try and see how we can bring all these things together. Then I think the next question, if you can move to the next slide. And then there was also the issue about the reduction in the packages of politicians as well as the managers. I think just to start with the issue of politician, Chair, I mean, currently the remuneration of public office bearers, which also include the political office bearers, I mean, is governed in terms of 219 of the Constitution, I mean, which requires that an independent commission be established to deal with those matters. So this is not an area that Treasury can, or any government department can just decide to take a decision that those salaries must be reduced, because the commission itself, it's independent, it does its work, does its own research, and come up with the recommendations that they made to the president in terms of how they think politicians should be remunerated. And of course, as the National Treasury, the commission does engage with us, they do consult with us, and we make our own submissions and express our own views in terms of what we think the levels should be. And they make their recommendation to the president, even the president as well, before making a determination, consult with the Minister of Finance. And we use that process, I mean, to try and influence the decisions in terms of this of the remunerations and packages of the political office bearers. And then in terms of the other benefits, I mean, the president did order that there must be a review of the current guide the guide for members of the executive, or otherwise what we normally refer to as the ministerial handbook. And the DPSA, I think, it's currently leading that process, and they will probably be the right department to also advise in terms of where we are. But I mean, the overall benefits of members of the executive are currently under review. I think as far as the Treasury is concerned, I mean, we also come in terms of determining the price threshold of official vehicles, and we've not really, I mean, we've kept the prices static since 2019, I mean, as a way of managing and trying to restrain expenditure relating to those benefits. And we've put in place transversal contracts to ensure that, I mean, the prices that we've put in place will still be applicable, and that the members of the executive will still be able to purchase prices within that limit. As far as the managers is concerned, I think, I mean, yes, we agree that for managers in some of the entities, I mean, their salaries probably need to be reviewed. And then I think people have been making I mean, there have been debates across the public sector and then outside the public sector around the remuneration of some of the executives in our state-owned entities. And I think, I mean, as part of the process that I've indicated, that the review of the review of the current public sector framework, I mean, we're looking at that to try and see if whether, I mean, especially as I've said, I mean, for those entities that rely solely on government transfers, I mean, it really does not make sense for them to earn way higher than the DGs and the HODs. So I think as part of that process, we'll be looking at that. But however, I must indicate, I mean, if you look at the managers in the public service and local government, whatever review that needs to happen there, it has to be linked to, because their salaries are linked to the salaries of those that are in the bargaining council. And you try to maintain gaps between the cohorts. So I don't think we can just take a decisions to go and reduce the salaries of those cohorts without reviewing the entire remuneration structure, because the risk there that will face is that we'll run a risk of employees that are in the bargaining council overlapping and starting earning more than the senior managers that are currently the senior management code. And in fact, we're already experiencing those problems in the local government in certain categories, as well as I'm also trying to maintain the gaps between your middle management, which are part of the bargaining council, as well as the SMSs. So you cannot do that without looking at the entire remuneration structure. Otherwise, then we'll be in a way phasing out the senior management code. And in looking at the remuneration structures of the bargaining council employees, I mean, it involved that bargaining process as well. So meaning that we have to go back and engage with the unions and all those kind of things before you even start looking at the management cohort. So I think I mean, those complexities, I mean, it comes with those kind of complexities with regard to the managers. I think the next slide. And then lastly, I think it was the issue of physical aid counts for ghost posts. I think we are in agreement as the National Treasury. In fact, in one of the letters, we've already written letters to our counterparts in the DPSA that a project of this nature should be initiated where we, go and do a PESAL cleanup to ensure that everyone that is on PESAL can be accounted for. And I must indicate that, I mean, an exercise of this nature were conducted in some of the provinces in the past. I know KZN has done it in their education department in Limpopo during the time of Section 100. States SA did assist there in education and health, and Gauteng have done it. And I mean, and it doesn't seem like, I mean, there were major problems that were detected in those provinces when they conducted this exercise. But however, I think we're in agreement and we've already engaged, and the engagement are continuing, that perhaps we need to find a way in which we can try and do this exercise across the entire public service. I mean, to ensure that, I mean, there is, everyone is accounted for, and that there are no people that are paid who are not supposed to be on the system. Thank you, Chair. I think I'll leave it there, Mampo, and hand it over to the other colleagues. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and honorable members. It's Rendani here. I will take you through some of the issues directed to the Justice and Protection Services. Starting with the Stakeholder Public Service Accountability Monitor. There was an issue raised, or a question raised: can funds be reallocated within the justice votes to ensure adequate resourcing of anti-corruption system? Yes, that's the spirit of our budget process, as encapsulated in the MTF guidelines, where we encourage departments to reprioritize funds either within the vote itself or outside the vote. In this budget, for example, 33 million was reprioritized towards the implementation of FATF recommendation to be implemented by the Financial Intelligence Center. So we've been doing this, we're not doing this for the first time, and we're still going to do it in future. And in addition, as part of resourcing the anti-corruption system, additional allocation was recommended to the NPA, for example, to deal with State Capture Commission recommendations. Mampo has already spoken about it. Secondly, it's the issue of compelling National Treasury to review the SIU funding model to ensure it is fully funded and able to deliver on its mandate. I must say that we support the current funding model, which is a hybrid model. A hybrid in the sense that we have got appropriated funds as well as the fee that they charge on their clients as part of the investigations that they do. We've been in discussion with SIU for a very long time. We've considered several options, hence our support for the hybrid funding model. And again, Chairperson, I must indicate that we have approved a surplus retention of almost $1 billion to deal with their cash flow during the course of the financial year. And we always do that. And again, this budget also allocates 100 million to the SIU to deal with the State Capture Commission recommendation. And the second issue raised is that given underspending by DOJ, that's the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, funds should be reallocated to the SIU. But at the moment, given the surplus that have been retained, which is close to $1 billion, from where we are sitting, we feel that there's no need to transfer. However, there are legal provisions that makes it possible for justice to increase transfer payments to the Special Investigating Unit. The other issue is that is to ensure that the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council receives adequate funding to ensure sustainability. This council is hosted in the presidency. Its members were appointed, I think, sometimes last year in August. These are early days. We'll engage with them should the need arise, should they feel that there's a need to allocate additional funding. As part of the budget process, we'll engage with them. However, it should be noted that the bulk of the work will be done by the law enforcement agencies in trying to implement the various pillars of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. So there are various stakeholders involved in that process, and the bulk of the work will be done by those law enforcement agencies and not necessarily by the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council. Next slide, please. So there was the issue of police numbers. I think Honorable Kaiso raised an issue. Is it 5,000 or is it 10,000 as included in the State of the Nation address? Let me start by saying that the budget as tabled, it provides for the appointment of 5,000 additional personnel in the current financial year. In the State of the Nation address is 10,000. The other 5,000, we must remember that it's as a result of the previous allocations made in the 22 MTF, which also provides for additional employment of the trainees in the current financial year. So the 10,000, it is both the budget as tables in February and the previous allocation made in the 22 MTF. I think this concludes my inputs on the issues which are directed to the Justice and Protection Services. I'll hand over to my colleague, Julia. Thanks, Chair and honorable members.
Thanks, Rendani. Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members and other colleagues on the platform. Equal Education made a very good presentation. However, a lot of the issues that they raised should be raised in provinces because that is where basic education's main spending takes place. But nonetheless, one of the issues they raised was asking the National Treasury to adopt a human rights approach to budgeting that prioritizes socioeconomic rights. In the budget review, we present a table that shows over 60% of total non-interest spending is allocated to the social wage, and those are programs in community development, employment programs, health, education, and social protection. So in our opinion, that is an indication that we do prioritize socioeconomic issues. Another issue that was raised both by one of the members in the select committee was related to spending on higher education versus that of basic education. So in the Appropriation Bill, we only reflect proposed allocations to national departments. So it is true, higher education's proposed allocation is roughly 111 billion vis-a-vis that of basic education, which is only 32 billion, so roughly 3 times. But basic education is mainly delivered in the 9 provincial departments, and if you add their total proposed allocations all together, it comes to 278 billion. So in fact, it is not true to say that higher education is allocated 3 times that of basic education. But when you take the spending and you divide it amongst the number of students in the higher education system versus that of basic education, it does roughly come out at 3 times as much. And that is because it costs a lot more to train a doctor, an engineer, or a motor mechanic than it does to run a school program. So there's not an issue here where equal education would do well. My advice would be to engage with the provincial legislatures on the education budgets in each of the provinces, because it is them that make the appropriation bills for the provinces, not the Standing Committee on Appropriation, who only deals with the national departments. Then COSATU has raised the issue of the CCMA struggling with case backlogs, and that we understand as the economy takes a downturn, more and more people are losing their jobs. In the previous MTF, 120 million additional was allocated to the CCMA to deal with dispute resolutions and the increasing caseload. And in fact, in this year's appropriation, the proposed transfer to the CCMA is just over 1 billion rand. So we think that that is sufficient for the CCMA to conduct their business. Thanks, Chair. That's the end of my part. I hand over to the next colleague. Thanks.
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson and Honourable members, and to colleagues on the platform. So we had for this committee also some of the sector departments who had presented on their budget.
Who's talking after Junior?
Chair, it is Ulrika Britton.
Come again?
It is Ulrika, Chair.
Okay, Ulrika. Okay, come in. We didn't hear you. Okay, come in, Ulrika.
Okay. So in the conversation, when the Department of Water and Sanitation presented to the committee, one of the big budgeting issues that popped up was in relation to the constraints in its personnel expenditure. So this is a department who has perpetually underspent on personnel. And as the department kind of went through their turnaround in the last 2 to 3 years, they have been able to fill those posts. But what has also been happening while the department had all those high vacancies is some shifts within its consultants' budget to augment the personnel expenditure, augment capacity to continue delivering on their programs. One of the things that is going to be important to do is to try and rebalance that budget in the context of the pressures that we are seeing on the overall wage bill. So the strategy, I mean, there's almost a two-pronged strategy here. On the one hand, we are conscious of the broader macro issues that we have within the wage bill and the percentage and how much of the budget that takes up versus the ability of the department to operate and to execute its functions. And with that comes some kind of rebalancing in what is in the department's consultants' budgets versus what needs to be in their compensation of employees' budget. Honourable Chair, in the conversation with the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, one of the big themes was around the South African Post Office. What's quite important, Chair, to note is that we are all aware of the financial position and the financial distress that SAPO finds itself in. But the 2.4 billion rand that was appropriated was that second adjustments appropriation that was enacted at the end of last financial year. What we have in the appropriation bill going forward is a standard amount of approximately 500 million rand a year for the post office to continue providing the universal services obligations. Just in relation to, I think it was Honourable Matafa who raised this around pothole hunters in pothole repairs in relation to road asset management. One of the important issues that we deal with within the provincial roads maintenance grant is around preventative road maintenance as probably one of the most cost-effective ways to maintain road infrastructure. The grant pays for, so it's not directly almost like pothole hunters, but it does pay for provinces to do visual condition assessments depending on the class of the road that it is and how often that happens in terms of the technical standards that we have for highways. So it's not like we are paying for people to go and hunt potholes, but one of the principles around visual condition assessments is that people go out and they measure the depth of the kind of rut that is caused by tires. They measure the size of the cracks, and this gets done periodically depending on, like I said, the class of the road as per the technical standards. So we do have some aspect of that already provided for in the provincial roads maintenance grant. Kasatu had raised the issue around, so this isn't directly an appropriation bill issue, but it is an important issue in understanding the broader fiscal context and the fiscal risks associated with road accident victim compensation. So the retabling of the RABS bill is supported. And Chair, it's primarily just to deal with the issues, the reforms around RABS is really around providing for a sustainable, equitable, and affordable compensation system that is based on social security principles as opposed to one that is based on liability insurance principles. Then Kasatu also raised this general issue around that the recapitalization of state-owned companies must be accompanied by turnaround plans. That's an important consideration, Chair, at least in the technical process in the budget, is assessing the efficacy of a turnaround plan so that we don't throw good money after bad or throwing money into a leaking bucket. So it's a key requirement that a turnaround plan does exist, that has been approved by the board when funding is considered or when departments then motivate for this. But Chair, part of a turnaround plan has two components. The one is how do you increase revenue, and the other one is how do you reduce costs. So when institutions are in financial distress, it is because they are running at significant losses and they have significant deficits. And in realigning all of this does mean sometimes that you have to reduce costs and realign organizational structures. So, for example, in the post office of tomorrow strategy that SAPO has, one of the things is recognizing that it is not business as 10 years ago or as 15 years ago, and some rationalization needs to be done for them to be competitive, and we should allow entities to do that so that the reliance on the fiscus is then reduced going forward. Next slide, please. And then the last one, Chair, was just in relation to issues that was raised both by the FFC and Youth Capital around infrastructure investment. Infrastructure spending in that we have in the budget review over the MTF is just under R1 trillion, and we do think that there's growing. So whilst the budgets for these things continue to grow, sometimes it's an expenditure is an issue. But I think what's important for us to understand is that a lot of, especially economic infrastructure, happens on the balance sheets of state-owned companies. So approximately a third of the public sector infrastructure investment over this MTEF is done by Eskom and Transnet. So this would be for the revitalization of rail, for port investment, and then across the various businesses of Eskom. And this is largely done. I mean, economic infrastructure, while it has the kind of short-term demand, the demand side, positive externalities, economic infrastructure is fundamentally done to boost the supply side capacity in the economy. And this is so that we are able to get more exports going through our harbors, that farmers can get more of the output to harbors and to markets. And we should be worried about the declining shares of the capital investment in other components within the public sector. We should really be worried about this in relation to local government and local government's reliance on conditional grants to do this, where they do have tradable services that then contributes to this infrastructure. So it's an important fiscal strategy for us to use to support economic growth, but it does mean that some of these risks need to be balanced between those who use it and taxpayers and the kind of social benefits that comes from it. I think that's where I end. Thank you, Mampo.
Good morning, honorable chairs and honorable members. I hope you can hear me. I'm Gillian Wilson. I will just take you through the issues
Good morning, Chairperson, honourable members. It's Mark Fletcher. I'll just talk to one item in the health and social development space, and that was the input provided by COSATU and 1 and 2 others about the SRD grant, suggesting the grant should be made permanent, raised to the food poverty line and linked to employment services and skills programs. So I think we have mentioned several times to the honourable members that is work looking at some options here, and this will be presented as part of the MTBPS and budget process, but we're not in a position to give all those details at this point. But it's probably worth pointing out that making the SRD 350 grant permanent would require a permanent revenue stream and an increase in taxation. And as uptake of the grant increases and the value of the grant potentially increases, raising it, for example, to 73% of the food poverty line, so not even to the food poverty line, but to 73% of the food poverty line, could cost 130 billion per annum by 2030. So that would require quite considerable tax increases. So if the Finance Committee of Parliament, would like to see this grant being permanent, for example, I do think you need to be thinking about what tax increases are needed to finance it. And then on the point made by COSATU about linking the grant to employment services and skills programs, National Treasury is in agreement with this. It would be much better if the grant recipients were linked to, for example, public employment programs, skills acquisition, work seeking, etc. And the committee is requested to engage with the other relevant portfolio committees, so the portfolio committees of social development and labor, because we found that these 2 departments have been very slow to do this, and the current grant does not do this. It very much just pays people an amount. It does not link them to work. It does not link them to skills. So we'd like to ask the committee's assistance, if they agree with this request that was made in your hearings, to speak to the other committees and to push this issue. Thank you, Chairperson. Back to the next colleague.
Who's next? Mampo?
Lebo is next, Chairperson. Lebo, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm on the call, Mampo. Thank you very much, Chairperson. In terms of economic services, there was there were questions raised by COSATU. The question was relating to the fact that government needs to provide assurance that the money owed to the workers at Denel will now be paid. We can confirm to date that all outstanding salaries, that were due to all the employees of Denel were paid last year in October. An amount of 992 million was raised from the Denel Medical Benefit Trust towards the payment of the salaries. So we can confirm that to date, the salaries continue to be paid, and there is no more an outcry around the issue of non-payment of the salaries by the employees. Another question was that more needs to be done, in terms of law enforcement to protect the railway infrastructure. We can confirm that last year as government, we've partnered with Transnet to make sure that we protect critical infrastructure. Different measures were devised to make sure that, for instance, scrap metals and so forth, there are interventions. We protect our railway lines and so forth. But we can confirm that we are collaborating, and we should be realizing some benefit to that aspect. Also, that we need to support ESCOM to reduce wasteful expenditure. Chair, you can also confirm that you are working closely with ESCOM and the Oversight Ministry, which is Department of Public Enterprises, to reduce wasteful expenditure. You may be aware that when we disperse funding to ESCOM, it comes with pre and post conditions. And through those conditions, we're able to monitor effective implementation of the funding so that there is no wastage or wasteful expenditure. And Section 4 of the Appropriation Act empowers the Minister of Finance to impose those conditions. And also through those conditions, we are able to exercise our monitoring. And if we're able to detect that money is not implemented according to the conditions, the Act empowers the Minister of Finance to immediately stop that funding. So that really provides us, with a leeway to make sure that we're able to monitor and we're able to stop, the funding if, implementation is not according to approved plan. The youth capital raised a question or a comment to say that our government, we must increase, the annual industrial financing budget to about 2.5% of GDP, with 1% directed towards SMMEs. We can confirm that over the 2023 MTF, through the DTIC, we have allocated 8.9 billion towards our business incentives program. And we can also say that this is not only limited to the small, medium, micro.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it 8.9 or 18.9?
18.9, Chair. Sorry about that.
Okay.
18.9 billion over a 3-year period. Thank you. And we are saying that this is brought to cover, SMMEs and non-SMMEs. We are supporting all the businesses through the incentives program under the DTIC. And we are saying that through the TREP, a program, a township and rural, entrepreneur program that is managed by the DTIC entity NEF. We are supporting business in the township and rural areas, and so far we have allocated 2.8 billion over the 3-year period. Also, we have the blended finance programs, which we are using to support SMMEs in terms of a combination of a loan and a grant funding. So we're using these programs to subsidize SMMEs to acquire private funding, and also to de-risk some of the funding that the private sector are not able to offload from their balance sheet. But we are also saying that there's an amount of 4.1 billion that we're also allocating over the MTF through this blended finance scheme. We also have the tax incentives that we are allocating to our businesses. We also have, as you may know, through the special economic zones, where we support with the tax incentives in terms of attracting investment, to those entities. Can you please go to the next slide? The youth capital also raised an issue of government, the need to introduce the lending targets or quotas for bank lending to labor-intensive sectors and Black SMMEs. The third of DFI disbursement, that it must be youth-owned enterprises. We can say that while at the moment, we don't have a policy position in terms of imposing bank lending quotas, but as government, we can confirm that we are collaborating with the private sector to support our industrial policy, among others, as in the case of the master plans. You may know the loan guarantee scheme that we've introduced in 2020, and we keep on refining. And of late, we've been also working with the banks and the DFI, IDC in particular, through the Bounce Bank scheme to make sure that we support particularly our SMMEs with the energy solutions to make sure that the load shedding, it doesn't become an impediment in terms of the sustainability of their businesses. We can also say that through the IDC, we have allocated funding in the form of a social employment fund, where we are saying that the youth-owned businesses, they can approach IDC with an innovative idea in terms of starting businesses, but also those businesses where is work towards a common good in the local communities, where they will create business, but they will employ local communities and make sure that their local communities, they thrive. So we are saying that this is an innovative idea, and actually it formed part of the Presidential Employment Initiative. So Social Employment Fund, through the DTIC, the implementing agency being the IDC, were able to support our youth-owned enterprises. Thank you, Chair.
Mampo. Mampo, who's next? Is Mampo still on the platform? If not, National Treasury management, anybody else must still come in. Julia?
Yeah, I think that was the end of that presentation. We can go on to the next one, which is the fourth quarter, or Ravesh can go on to ALM's presentation. What is your preference, Chair?
Anyhow, your preference is my preference. Thank you.
Okay, Ravesh, if you're ready.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. My name is Ravesh. I'm just waiting for the host to actually help us to project our presentation, and then we can start.
Good morning, Ravesh.
Okay.
How are you?
Morning.
Yeah, I've made you a co-host.
Thank
Okay, let's go, Ravesh. You are now a co-host.
Okay, let me try and project, because sometimes, Chair, I do get kicked out of Zoom, but let me try.
Let's see.
Let's
There
check
you
if
are.
you can.
Yeah, we can see a presentation.
Okay.
Take it on.
Chair,
it to
thank you.
slide.
Thank you for the opportunity to present. My name is
Rajesh.
Ravesh Raja, as I mentioned.
Ravesh?
So the team will
Sorry.
be taking us.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Take it to a slide mode.
Okay, let me try that. Great. All right. So excellent. Okay, thanks, Honorable Chair and honorable members. So I'll be leading the team on our
Mashile, we don't want
Chairperson,
to. Yes.
Chairperson, I think Ravesh is experiencing challenges when he's projecting. I will project from my side, and then I'll just allow him to speak to the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Did you hear that?
Okay, thanks, Honorable Chair. Thanks for that. Appreciate it, Darren. So we're going to basically take you through the Q4 SOC expenditure and the results. So I think, Chair, what we would want to just highlight to the committee and the honorable members is that the Q4 financial figures that we'll present are very provisional and they're not final yet because those have to be audited by the external auditors. So the figures that you will see are very provisional from the entities. I think in the meantime, while we get the presentation up and running, I think the first presenter will be Lefenze, who will take us through on land bank. So I think while we wait for the presentation to be flighted, maybe Lefenze, you can. There we go. You can start from your side, and then we'll hand over to Tabang after that. Thank you, Honourable Chair and honourable members.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping that you can all well see me. I'm not sure whether I should continue with the video because I'm sure at some point it will start interfering with good quality of sound. But if it does, then I'll switch it off. Chair, we have discussed the land bank several times in this meeting, and the status quo with regards to liability solution remains. The land bank has not managed to conclude the liability solution discussions with the lenders, but there are some good things that are actually coming out. You'll see with the numbers that Erin will actually discuss or share with you in the third slide of the land bank. In total, out of the 40 billion that land bank owed, land bank has managed to reduce that capital by 18.1 billion, which basically shows that there's something good that is happening. For the 7 billion that was actually approved for the land bank, we've managed to set the equity conditions, and the equity conditions are actually reflected in the slide as follows. The land bank should provide written assurance that it complies with section 38.1J of the PFMA. Basically, it's more about good financial management and practices. The land bank also must provide evidence that it will safeguard the 5 billion that it had actually received as part of the equity condition. And I'm sure Chair would ask why only 5 billion. I'll actually explain in the next slide why we're only talking about 5 billion. And then National Treasury and the Land Bank must agree on a sustainable business plan to operationalize the blended finance program, which we are still discussing with the Land Bank to make sure that this blended finance program becomes more of a program that will basically make Land Bank to be more of a DFI than a corporate bank. Land Bank to provide written assurance that it will be able to safeguard the initial equity allocation plus all future returns from the lenders. The 3 billion of the 5 billion would be utilized for, and the remaining 2 billion be used to cure the default. You'll remember, Chair, that one of the conditions that were given when the 5 billion was actually 7 billion was approved was that Land Bank must also make sure that it cures the default. And based on the discussion that has been happening, it seems like the lenders would be fine with the 2 billion basically used as part of the money that will be used to cure the default. And the last one is that Land Bank must provide written confirmation to the minister that the fiscal allocation will only be used for the purpose for which it was intended. And all of this we have actually received from the Land Bank in a written confirmation, a letter written to the minister that it will use this money. What you will do is just keep on monitoring Land Bank on a monthly basis to make sure that everything goes according to the executing conditions. Can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you very much. Like I said, the amount that was actually approved for the Land Bank was 7 billion, but which is the 2 billion should be utilized to I'm receiving something that says my internet is unstable. Okay, part of that would be utilized, which is 2 billion, will be utilized to pay the guaranteed lenders. We have already paid some of the guaranteed lenders. 1 billion of that amount to the Land Bank should actually, in fact, 6 billion has already been received by the Land Bank. And part of the 6 billion has already paid the guaranteed lenders. The remaining amount is 7 billion. In fact, it's 1 billion. And 1 billion will actually flow to the Land Bank this financial year. But part of that 1 billion will still pay the remaining guaranteed lenders. And the two remaining guaranteed lenders are the African Development Bank and the World Bank. I think the amount that needs to go to them out of the 1 billion is around 400 million. And the remaining amount would actually flow to the Land Bank to support the blended finance, which is estimated at around 6 billion. If the numbers don't move because of the interest rates and all other things that have been moving over a period of time. There's what Land Bank, what we have actually said to the Land Bank is that, and what Land Bank is actually doing now is to request Land Bank to come with a new business case, and which they are working on. The CEO of the Land Bank has, new CEO and the board has indicated to National Treasury that they will be actually giving us or discussing the new business case in terms of how they will make the Land Banks more of a development financial institution and also more of a sustainable institution between now, which is May, and June, which will obviously, when it's actually shared and agreed upon with the minister, we will obviously share with the committee when required to do so. Thanks very much, Chair. I think this is where Land Bank is in terms of how it's moving and with liability solution and the discussion with the lenders. The next slide, Erin will talks to the financial position of the Land Bank. Thanks very much.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson and members. As at the end of Q4, which would be the full financial year until the 31st of March 2023, the Land Bank reported a net profit of 695 million against a budgeted loss of 184 million. Last year, they made a profit of 1.4 billion. The main reason for the profit for the year was a net impairment release of 450 million and a decrease in the non-interest expense driven by a decrease in the SLA admin fee as the Land Bank has insourced the majority of its SLA portfolio. The Land Bank also generated net interest income of 702.6 million compared to 595 million reported in the prior year. And this is mainly due to interest expense decreasing as the Land Bank has been paying down its funding liabilities. Funding liabilities decreased to 22.5 billion due to interest and capital repayments during the year. And the net loans and advances have also decreased to 15.3 billion. And this is part of the Land Bank's asset solution, as they are reducing the loan book owing to restricted disbursements and clients' settlements. The Land Bank's non-performing loans has reduced on a net value by 2.6 billion for the year through the implementation of the NPL remediation strategies. However, the NPL ratio has increased to from 47.7% at the end of March 2022 to 51.6% at the end of March 2023. And this is primarily because of the gross loan book reducing. I think it is important to note that on a RAND basis, the NPLs have been decreasing, but because the loan book is decreasing, it's resulting in the NPL ratio increasing for the Land Bank. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Erin. It's now Mr. Tabang Masoka on Eskom.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, honorable members. I'm not going to focus on each and every slide because of time, so I'm just going to focus on the key message I want to deliver, Chair. Eskom continues to be reliant on government support for to ensure their status going concern status and to honor their debt obligations. Eskom financial sustainability is mostly threatened by a declining customer base, unsustainable high levels of borrowings and debt servicing, and growing municipal debt, and the lack of cost reflective tariffs. Basically, Eskom is not generating sufficient cash from operating activities to cover the cost of servicing both the interest and capital, and that's what prompts the need for continuous support, government support. Hence, the Minister of Finance in the budget speech announced the Eskom debt relief solution as a part of government efforts to turn around Eskom. And we must also highlight that the guarantee framework that enabled Eskom to use government guarantees to raise external funding for its capital expenditure came to an end on 31st March 2023. And with a new regime regarding the proposed Eskom debt relief, no new borrowings will be allowed for Eskom until the end of the debt relief period, unless written permission is granted by the Minister of Finance. And also to highlight that for the 2022-23 financial year, Eskom received equity support of 21.9 billion just to settle their debt and interest. You can go to slide number 2. So here we are dealing about the operational performance of Eskom, and as is widely known and it's felt across the country, Chair, Eskom generation continue to experience unreliable performance of its power generating plants, mainly because of the delayed and inadequate maintenance, as well as the delays in the commissioning of a new plants and faults detected in the new units that have been commissioned. And as at 31st March 2023, Eskom reported energy availability factor, which is gives an indication of plant performance of 56.3%, which is slightly lower than the previous financial year of 62, and it's significantly trending below the target of 65%. And the decrease in EAF compared to previous years and against the target is due to significant increase in unplanned performance, which means the plants are highly unreliable. So that causes the trips now and then. So I think by and large, this leads to the highest utilization of the diesel burn, which is open cycle gas turbines, which is very expensive to try to support the system and to reduce load shedding. And this comes at a cost, because Eskom for that has spent 23.3 billion against the target, or against higher than the previous financial year figure of 10.03 billion. The next slide. So here we are dealing with the compliance of equity conditions for 2022-23 financial year, and you can notice that we had in total 24 conditions, and ESCOM by and large complied with all the conditions. So to monitor progress towards complying with these conditions, bi-monthly monitoring task team comprising officials from National Treasury, DP and ESCOM was established, and ESCOM complied with all these conditions and provided the required information, and where further investigation or approvals are required, ESCOM provides the best available information. And we must highlight, although ESCOM has been complying with this condition previously, the situation has not changed, and which is a concern. So hence the National Treasury had to adopt a different approach that will strengthen the balance sheet of the utility, enabling it to restructure and undertake investment and maintenance needed to support the security. So with the current recently announced that relief solution, we are looking at a different way of putting conditions to make changes in the entire or the whole electricity industry, also to reshape the future of ESCOM. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Masocha. Mr. George Siping on the post office.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Chair, for the opportunity to present. Well, I'm going to be very short with the post office, but basically is that the status quo remains with SAPO, that it's under financial distress, but not only under financial distress, they're also under what item strategic distress. As much as they have the strategy of tomorrow in place, and had I think in the previous quarter I had said that they had started implementing it. This is highly reliant on the fact that it needs funding, and such funding is not available, and it's highly reliant on its old business model that needs to be changing. And again, it comes down to financial need for implementing the strategy. So,
George, I see. I don't know. On my side, I still have got an ESCOM slide.
If we could just ask Ravesh to move to the SAPO slide,
please. Okay. Yeah, proceed.
Yeah, so I was saying, so SAPO remains in its status quo, where it's under financial distress, and to a large extent a strategic distress, where they have a strategy that they're trying to implement, but they don't have the funds to do so. And with all the effort that the DCT has put in place, we now end up at the current financial problem where it's placed under liquidation. That's summarizing the first slide. And if the current performance, if you can go to the next slide, Ravesh, I'll just quickly summarize it. Basically, the year-to-date revenue has come down to 2.6 billion at expenses of 5.1 billion. And you see that gap, and you realize the resulting net loss is 2.1 billion for the quarter being reported now. And then all this slide summarizes they're still commercially illiquid and insolvent, and they're sitting with at the end of March, we have accrued creditors of 5.1 billion that had stayed unpaid at the time. And despite the 2.4 billion that was recently allocated, and just to mention, the 2.4 had conditions attached to it, but those conditions are now, would now become a subject, then could change because of the provisional liquidation process that SAPO is facing. And then lastly, most recently, is that the DCT had requested the cabinet to approve SAPO to be placed under business rescue. This is to mitigate against a little bit more aggressive approach that was done for the liquidation order. But the message with this is whether we go liquidation route or we leave the liquidation to go through, or we place it under business rescue, there's still a financial implication that is needed for the post office. It's a matter of magnitude and the immediacy of the need that is being there. So due to the business rescue option also being premised on the funding of SAPO's business of tomorrow, hence the point about it doesn't matter which way we let to go by the courts if the decision is made. There's still need for SAPO to be funded. Thank you, Ravesh. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Mr. George Supeng. If we can move to Denel, if we can get Darren to move the slides to Denel, and then it's Ms. Larissa van der Westhuizen on Denel. Thanks.
Thank you, Ravesh. Good morning, Chair and honorable members. My name is Larissa, and I will be providing a quick update on Denel, as I think most of us are well versed on some of the challenges that the entity has been experiencing over recent years. So as a result of these challenges, government was not only required to settle Denel's guaranteed debt obligations, but has also provided the entity with numerous recapitalizations. The most recent was the recapitalization of nearly 3.4 billion allocated in 2022-23. So this was in support of Denel's new turnaround plan and to complement the 1.8 billion that the entity has committed to raise through the disposal of its identified non-core assets. So these funds were dispersed to Denel during March 2023. So to enforce accountability on Denel, to follow through on these identified self-help initiatives, we took the approach of linking the disbursement to conditions and progress made on the disposals. So to date, Denel has only realized the proceeds of one identified transaction, which is the Medical Benefit Trust surplus, and this allowed the entity to have immediate access to 55% of the 1.8 billion rand committed. The remaining portion is being ring-fenced by Denel and monitored by the board until such time that money is in the bank from the additional disposal proceeds. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as at 31 March 2023, the financial position of Denel has improved given the portion of the recapitalization received, as well as the funds realized through the disposal transaction, as we can see from the positive equity and liquidity figures presented in the slide. However, delivering on the turnaround plan remains a priority to sustain this positive trajectory. So we will continue to monitor the progress being made on the ongoing disposal initiatives, with regular engagements taking place between us and the entity as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Larissa. It's now over to Mr. Tatu Masenya on SAA and Transnet.
Thank you, Ravesh, and good morning to the Honorable Chair and the Honorable members. The committee will recall that in September of 2020, Cabinet had approved a 10.5 billion allocation to SAA for the implementation of the business rescue plan. Subsequent to that, 2.7 billion had to be allocated to subsidiaries. Since the subsidiaries were not under business rescue, a Special Appropriation Act distributed that 2.7 to three SAA subsidiaries, namely the SAA Technical, Mango Airlines, and Airchefs. It was against that background that the committee requested us to provide quarterly updates to Parliament on the utilization of that allocation to those subsidiaries. Next slide, please. And just to highlight once again to committee members and the Honorable Chair, is that SAA is no longer technically insolvent. Its net equity value has significantly improved, so has its performance. SAA ended March 2023 with a year-to-date profit of 500 million against a budgeted loss of 740 million. And as Ravesh emphasized earlier, these figures are unaudited, and we need to re-emphasize that once again. And the rest of the slide, Chair, just provides the breakdown of the utilization for the respective subsidiaries. And in the interest of time, I won't go through that. just to highlight that in terms of air shafts, we are seeing improvement in financial performance, although it is still loss-making. Next slide, please. Chair, I think when it comes to Mango, we should bring a few issues to the attention of the committee. And the last time I think we were here, we did highlight that Mango had gone under business rescue, and the business rescue plan was subsequently published a few months after that. And similar to what we have provided in previous slides, we're also providing a background, a breakdown in terms of how the allocation to Mango was utilized. We also noted, Chair, that the business rescue practitioner was looking for a strategic equity partner for the airline, and we also received a PFMA application in that regard, indicating the intention by SAA through the business rescue practitioner to dispose 100% shareholding in Mango to an entity called Ubuntu. And in between that and us preparing a response in that regard, the BRP subsequently filed an application in the High Court against the Minister of Public Enterprises and others for the Minister to provide a decision on the PFMA application. And as we are speaking, that matter is being heard in the North Gauteng High Court this morning. Next slide, to discuss Transnet. Thank you. Chair, on Transnet, we are just highlighting a few operational difficulties or challenges with the entity. Transnet freight rail operations have negatively been impacted by ongoing security incidents, which we highlight whenever we appear before this committee, and locomotive unavailability is one of the challenges, as well as the poor state of the rail infrastructure. It must also be emphasized that inefficiencies of Transnet freight rail network poses a significant risk to the economy and requires urgent intervention. The decline in freight rail is as a confluence of factors, which amongst others is operational inefficiencies within the entity itself, theft and vandalism, historical underinvestment in the network is one of the reasons. So we're also highlighting challenges in the port operations as well. Port productivity is significantly lower than benchmark African and European ports, as per published studies. Maintenance of critical equipment is the main contributor. At the port of Durban has seldom has higher than 60% availability of container equipment, just indicating how inefficient the operations in that port are. And however, Chair, one of the conditions that we attached when we provided funding to Transnet in 2022-23 financial year was that an independent review led by the National Treasury of all freight corridors will be undertaken with specific focus identifying opportunities for operational efficiency improvement. Thank you. That's it from my side, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Tata Masenya. Chair, we hand over back to Dr. Madisa and team. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravesh, and the team. Dr. Mampo, are you back? Dr. Mampo, Julia, can you help?
Sure, if Darren can please put up the presentation of the fourth quarter.
This Darren? Darren, are you there? I know he was also struggling with his connectivity. Are you there, Darren?
Yes, we are trying to sort it out, Chair.
Okay.
Chairperson, can you hear me?
Oh, Dr. Mampo is back. I was about to start.
Yes, finally, we can hear you, Dr. Mampo. Thanks, Julia, for holding the fort.
Thanks, Chair. Network is giving me stress this morning. Thank you so much, Chairperson. Just quickly going through the slides. So, firstly, I think I need to appreciate the committee for allowing us to do the 2022-23 spending outcomes. And I think the reason why, Chairperson, we asked you that you consider us is because we thought that it would be better for the committee when you are considering the appropriation bill to also have sight of what the numbers look like. So basically what we're going to take you through would be the outcomes of 22-23, and also some of the outcomes of the public entities for the third quarter of 22-23. Next slide. So Chairperson, it is quite good this year that the underspending is less than last year and the year prior. So in total, for the departments, for the appropriation bill, we're looking at an underspending of 15.8 billion, and this represents 1.4% of the underspending relative to what was allocated. So what I did here, Chairperson, was to show the committee the trends of underspending starting from 2014-2015. So how you would look at the table, I know it has too many colors, but basically you have the adjustments budget, which is the revised allocations after the MTBPS. So we're not looking at February, we're looking at MTBPS, and then compared to the actual spending, and then we're looking in terms of rand value, the actual overspending or underspending, and then in terms of the percentage of underspending relative to the adjustments budget. Everything that is red and darker, it means it is underspending. So the darker the red, it means the higher the underspending. Then in terms of green, the darker the green, it means overspending. So Chairperson, if you look at the total allocation, as I said, it was 15.8 billion. For this year, what drove the underspending was under transfers. We have 9.6 billion under transfers that was underspending. I will explain where that comes from, but also we saw that under goods and services, there was an underspending of 5.3%. This is much better or much improved than the underspending in goods and services during COVID time, because we're looking at values above or around 16 billion in 2020-21 and 12 billion in 21-22. So it means most of the departments, Chairperson and honorable members, manage to kickstart most of their plans, although there were delays in other departments, but they did manage to kickstart their procurement plans, and they've managed to spend most of the funds that were allocated to them. Next slide. Thank you. So, Chairperson and honorable members, this graph just gives you, according to all the votes, the department that showed the most significant underspending and the departments that showed the most overspending. So we have two departments that overspent their budget, which I'll get into, Defense and Statistics SA, but we also have departments that showed significant underspending, which I will look at now. But if you look at this slide, Chairperson and honorable members, most of the departments actually spent aligned. Their spending was aligned to the allocations that they received. Next slide. So, Chairperson, these are the departments that we thought we should bring to your attention, looking at their underspending. But what is very clear here, Chairperson and honorable members, is that you have departments that showed significant underspending, but then you also have the last 5 departments where the underspending is between 400 and 600 million. I mean, that is not significant underspending, especially depending on the allocations that the different departments have. But we thought we just show you the top 10 underspenders, and then we just go through some of the issues that they highlighted as reasons for underspending. Next one. So, Chairperson, I think the first one department that I'm going to focus on, next one, Darren, would be the Department of Social Development. The next one.
Mashida, next slide.
Thank you. So, Chairperson, what we did with the Department of Social Development was that we introduced new criteria to try and deal with inclusion errors. So basically what we did.
Sorry, is this a slide you're looking for, ma'am?
No, the social development one, he had the right one. Yes, this one.
Yeah,
yes, this one, Chair. Thank you. So basically what we did, Chairperson and honorable members, is that firstly, we introduced an income test. So we worked with different banks to make sure that, we take out people who are receiving other income from other bank accounts. And then we get the banks to cross-check the income that a person gets across the different bank accounts. We introduced that. Secondly, what we try to do, Chairperson, is that people do get employment during the course of the year. So if someone gets a job during the course of the year, then they no longer qualify for the grant. So those people are excluded from receiving the 250 grant. Of course, if that person has a temporary job and that job, or it's for 3 months, in the next following months, if that person doesn't have a job, then certainly they qualify to receive the grant. So by introducing further criteria to deal with the inclusion errors has resulted in the savings of around 6.4 billion. Chairperson, let me just qualify the savings, what we mean. So in the past, because we didn't have this criteria, we used the past allocations as an estimate of how much this grant is going to cost us. So because now we introduce these new measures to deal with inclusion errors, it means we overestimated the amount that would have been required to service the people that, or the beneficiaries that qualified to get the grant. So this is not an underspending from Department of Social Development, or this is not saving. This is mainly because we use the past to estimate how much a grant is going to cost us, and we didn't want to allocate funding that is not enough for the grant while we were still implementing these criteria. So this is, in its sense, Chairperson, was an overestimate rather than this being an underspending for the Department of Social Development. Then on the next slide, Chairperson, the underspending that we're also picking up would be underspending in COGTA, and mainly there, Chairperson, it was because we had to offset the local government equitable share. This will be against some of the rollovers that the local government would have applied for but were not approved. And basically these rollovers were not transferred back to the National Revenue Fund. So what we then did was the municipality would keep the amount that they applied for, but we then offsetted that amount through the equitable share. These are some of the municipalities where the rollovers were not approved and we had to do this adjustment. In the next slide. So Chairperson and honorable members, there's two main reasons why the Department of Health is featuring in the underspending for this year, and an underspending of 1.7 billion. As you can see, Chairperson and honorable members, this was their largest underspending recorded since we are doing the analysis since 2014-15. And mainly here was because we allocate, the state or parliament allocated funds for the COVID vaccines, but they were not procured because the uptake was not as estimated, it was not as high as estimated to be. So the Department of Health then didn't utilize the funds that were allocated by Parliament, and therefore registering the most of the underspending. But there were also areas where the department didn't spend, and that would be, or had lower than expected spending, that would be the NHI related allocations, but also the department had delays in the Limpopo Academic Hospital project. Therefore, from the capital assets underspending, that would be the main reason. The next one. Chairperson, I think Lifente spoke about the land bank. The major reason for the Treasury's underspending of 1.3 relates to the fact that the land bank, so money was allocated by Parliament to the National Treasury to deal with the land bank, but the creditors then, because the land bank defaulted, they then requested to be paid, and that amount was paid through the NRF. So basically, this is just the money was allocated, so it just means it's going to move back into the array in the National Revenue Fund, but the funds were paid to the land bank creditors, or yes, land bank creditors. So in the books of the Treasury, it shows the underspending, but there would have been an increase in the NRF, or I mean, there would have been a decrease in the National Revenue Fund of the same amount. And then there were other underspending that were registered by the National Treasury. That includes the issues of IFMS, it includes some of the projects that are in the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, but marginally so, they were underspending in terms of transfers and subsidies, and these were post-retirement medical scheme. Next one. For water and sanitation, Chairperson and honorable members, the underspending was 861 million, which represents 4.6%. But this is quite an improvement from the two previous years underspending, where it was around 2.5 billion. So the 4.6% is much more improved spending outcomes than the 14.7 and the 14.6 in the previous years. But basically, Chairperson, the delays that were due, or the delays by implementing agents to appoint contractors, and some of the issues that are there in terms of infrastructure projects impacted on the ability of the department to spend. But as I say, the way we look at this is that there has been significant improvement in the manner in which the department spends relative to the past years, but they still have some teething problems that they will have to resolve, so that at least going forward, they spend what is allocated. Next slide. For human settlements, Chairperson, the underspending was 620 million, and this represented about 1.9% of the underspending. But basically here is that some of the applicants, the funding was not dispersed, and basically what is critical to note, Chairperson and honorable members, is that the grants were topped up in the adjustments budget, and these were for disasters, but no funds were dispersed for the disasters post the MTBPS or post adjustments budget. So it means that while we did allocate funding for this, the processes took long, so they haven't really dispersed some of the funds that we allocated to the department through the MTBPS. Next slide. Then, Chairperson, I think focusing on the Department of Transport, and relative to their budget, the underspending is quite minimal, 0.6%, which is about 600 million. And basically, the reasons for underspending, according to the department, is on transfers and subsidies as well as goods and services. But basically, this is because there was lesser demand for the tax recapitalization program, but also the administrative adjudication of the road traffic offenses. The rollout has been stopped because of the Constitutional Court ruling. So spending on that project has been stopped. That's why there is some level of underspending within the Department of Transport. Next slide. The Department of Higher Education and Training, Chairperson and honorable members, continues to struggle a bit in terms of their spending. This is mainly because of the delays that are there, or the length of time it takes for the department to process applications. And this is mainly in the compensation of employees' budgets, but basically the length at which the department has to advertise, get the applications, assess the applications, shortlist, and at the end appoint takes too long because of the number of applications that they get. So the main reason here for the underspending is mainly that. But I think, Chairperson, I mean, even if you try to assist the department, it has to be, even if you give them capacity, the number of these applications that they get are so many because of the number of people that are looking for employment. So basically, even if you capacitate them, because of the thousands of applications that they get, it even becomes difficult for them to process these applications as fast as they should. But this is mainly some of the main reason for the underspending. And the next one, please. In terms of the Department of Agriculture, Chairperson, the underspending was, it's the one before. This is Home Affairs, please go back one. Thank you. So, Chairperson, here we're looking at a 2.4% of underspending, which is around 500 million or 127.9 million. And this was because of the lower spending in compensation of employees. And this is mainly because the department had or experienced delays in filling up some of the posts, but also transfers and subsidies were much lesser, or they transferred less. And this is because of the lesser financial compensation on the restitution settlement claims. And then lastly, the lower spending was mainly because of the delays in finalizing the evaluation report by the Office of the Valuer General, and withdrawing some of the sales officers by the sellers of the different lands. Next slide, which is Home Affairs. So, Chairperson, looking at Home Affairs, their underspending was close to 400 million, which is 3.6%. And basically here, mainly it is delays in filling vacancies, delays in rolling out the Border Management Authority, as well as some of the delays in signing the bill by the 31st of March, which meant that the Department of Home Affairs couldn't really spend the funds by the 31st of March 2023. So these are some of the delays that were not in the hands of the departments. These were because of external delays that resulted in some of their underspending. Next one. So Chairperson and honorable members, there were 2 departments that registered over expenditure, and basically the process that they will have to follow to deal with the over expenditure, if it is classified as unauthorized expenditure, would be basically to go to SCOPA, the Standing Committee on Accounts, and apply and motivate why their unauthorized expenditure needs to be rectified and removed from their books. But basically, we have the Department of Defense and we have status A. So basically, the reason for the Department of Defense, please go to the next slide, is that the department couldn't implement their HR rejuvenation strategy at the pace at which it was anticipated, despite Parliament allocating 1.8 billion to help them deal with their HR processes. So because they couldn't reduce the numbers and there were other costs that they incurred, they couldn't really stay within the compensation limits. Therefore, they spent more than what was allocated for the compensation of employees, but the amount was so significant that it resulted in the department overspending on the vote itself. Then the second one that underspent, Chairperson, was the statistics essay, and they overspent because of the population census. The department did try to get rollovers. They did try to reprioritize to reprioritize some of their funding, but despite those efforts, they ended up with an over expenditure of close to 800 million. They also have to follow the same process as with the Department of Defense to try and rectify the over expenditure. Then, Chairperson, we basically put together the slides on the public entities. I won't go through them. I'll just the ones that I think the committee needs to be aware of. So the first one that there might be questions will be the compensation fund. And basically here is because of the higher than expected revenue, but this was mainly because of the assessment levies. So it's not that they're paying people less, but it's because they've assessed the levies, but also there's more employers that are coming into the fund. The other one that we have highlighted would be the National Health. Chair?
I was saying, can they move the slides to the ones you are talking to?
Yes, I think my slide person is moving much slower than I'm talking.
Okay, continue then. Slide person, try to catch up with the pace of Dr. Mampo.
Thanks, Chair. The next one is the National Health Laboratory Services. This entity has registered higher revenue, which is very good. And this is because they started collecting from previous debts, and this has improved their collections quite significantly. The National Skills Fund, they have higher revenue, but this is mainly because of the collections by SARS, but also they've improved in their investments portfolio. Then the National Student Fund, NSFAS, National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Here we're picking up a deficit, but the deficit basically is mainly because the entity had delays in finalizing the memorandum of understanding with different funders. And also you have payments that were higher than expected. And this was because of the student fee accounts that were higher than what they estimated. But basically the entity has committed, Chairperson, that going forward, it will start the engagement with the funders much earlier to avoid a situation where there are delays in signing these MOUs. Then in terms of PRASA chairperson, I think we need to acknowledge that the entity is now at the point where they are spending their capital budget. We are seeing some of improvements in the manner in which they're spending their funds. So for this year, they spent significant amounts in terms of their capital spending. I think when we come back at the end of the year, for the entities, we will show that relative to other years, there has been improvement in their capital expenditure. But of course, the entity is still struggling with the operational budget or operational deficits. We have been having engagements with the entity to try and assist them where possible, where we have to look at their planned capital expenditure, but also how do they going to turn around the entity such that they don't see such operational deficits. But I think what we're reporting today is that for the first time in a very long year, we can see improvement in terms of their capital budgets. Chairperson, I think in the rest of the entities, the issues the committee knows, and I think for most of them, the funding is aligned to expectations, but these are the ones that I thought I must just give a brief update so that the committee is aware of the recent developments. Thank you so much, Chairperson and honorable members.
Dr. Mampos, I take it that's the end of your presentation?
Yes, Chair, sorry, it was a marathon of 2 hours.
It's okay, it's okay. Let's see how we deal with it. Honorable members, any takers? 2 things. National Treasury responded on the issues that were raised around the appropriations. That's 1, and 2, on they reported on the last quarter of 2022-23 expenditure of both departments, SOCs, and the entities. So let's hear.
Mare. Mlenzana. Mare.
Okay, Honorable Mare, Honorable Mlenzana. Any other taker? Honorable members, any other taker? Honorable Kaiso. Yes, honorable members. Honorable Mare, you may take down your hand. I've recognized it. Any other honorable member? Honorable Tobias.
I said no, Chair.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Let's go, Honorable Mare.
Thank you, sir. I must admit, actually in the rural areas, so I was kicked out 3 times from the platform, but that doesn't matter. Signal wasn't that good. My question is straightforward to the first presenter from Treasury. And sorry for that I didn't catch his name in full. It's about the public representatives of the people keeping public office. And in this case, specifically, it is all members of parliament and ministers and deputy ministers, as the case might be. I put a question forward as a question of clarity and a question of confirmation that once money has been paid out from Treasury to a pension fund, is it correct if I state then it belongs to the pension fund and to the members of the pension fund? I did ask for clarity at 2 insurance companies about this, and they said the moment the money is being paid over by the employer into a pension fund, it belongs to the members of the fund. And I would really like them to actually talk about this. So that's a question of clarity and a question of confirmation. And in this specific regard, is payment that has been done by the employer, that's Parliament, to the pension fund of the members of Parliament. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Honorable Mare. Honorable Mlenzana.
Chairperson, you can see my video is very blurry, so let me appeal that I switch it off.
Please proceed, Honorable Mlenzana.
Thank you so much. For me, I am more interested today, Chair, on the expenditure trends. Just two, if not three, on the expenditure trends, Dr. Mampo. One, my interest is on the land bank. Are you able to follow what we have appropriated to the land bank up to the level of the beneficiary? Are we able to say, in this particular quarter, transfers that have been done to the land bank have actually reached these specific beneficiaries? And if possible, not necessarily today, Chairperson, but this is the information we can be fed in after the meeting, in terms of the beneficiary per province, per district, and so on, so that we can be able during the constituency period to make a follow-up on impact assessment, on what is it that in terms of your land use and agriculture, are our people doing as per that allocation. I'm raising this, Dr. Mampo, cautious of the fact that I shouldn't be quick into drawing allegations. However, some of us who are in the rural areas, Chairperson, would notice a situation that there is a big chunk of money which we appropriate and ultimately lands, I would say, on wrong hands, because those hands do not do the intended process that the money was actually appropriated for. That is one. And then this one, Dr. Mampo, also may not be generic. I'm not sure if you would be ready. I'm listening that you would have overspending, some departments with overspending. I tried to listen, but not conclusively. But I don't want to assume, Chairperson, if I could be put on the correct pedestal. Is this overspending, Dr. Mampo, not more on OPEX than on CAPEX in this department? Are we not, not monitoring overspending, which goes to operational expenditure? Even that operational expenditure, if I listen to you now, when you are talking under expenditure, you would find that even though there's overspending on operational expenditure, but when it comes to the payment of your workers, compensation of employees, there is underspending for many reasons. You were talking delays in terms of the recruitment processes and all, which then results into a situation where you would have underspending. Just to be put on the correct pedestal as far as that one is concerned. And then, Chair, the last one. Sorry for this truck, which is making a noise. The last one would be Dr. Mampo. Are we ready with a list of notorious departments and entities which continue with underspending, and as such would warrant us visiting them either by way of us conducting our own constituency work or through a joint kind of an approach as the standing committee, maybe through oversight. We have been asking for this short list, Dr. Mampo. Are we still not ready with that short list, wherein we can say we want now to initiate a program which is deliberate in terms of dealing with these notorious departments? Because look, it has been some time now that we have been harping on underspending. Thank you, Chairperson, for the time, and let me welcome the detailed report, particularly that pie chart which was, projected to us in terms of the performance of the various departments and entities. Thank you so much.
Honorable Lenzana, thank you. Honorable Kaiso, please come in.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and Dr. Mampo and your team. Thank you very much for this detailed presentation. Well, I don't know, Chair, what was the intention of presenting the first section of the presentation with a very faint font. I had to look for my specs. I can enlarge the readings there, but then I understand the fine print sometimes. What do they do? But over and above that, one would like to welcome this presentation. It is well informed. Let me start here, Chair, on the responses from Treasury. Of course, these improvements which have been made by Treasury, we note them, especially around the issue of attempt to beef up on the fight against corruption, some additional funding there, and the area that I want to go to is this one of additional grant for SRD. I wanted to link it with the challenges there on social development, and underspending. Well, one, we do not have the breakdown as to, because I thought that the more the people exit the system, the more would be other ones who want to, whom the system is up to be enrolled to receive the grants. I just assume there is that, but it's very difficult to see. It's when then there's an underspending. It's like there was, it's not like there's natural attrition or there's attrition. So I won't be able to say what are the reasons of, because our population is over 54 million, and then we have to have a sense of a number of unemployed, in readiness, so that to understand the proportion that the SRD plays in as far as that significant number is concerned, and how that number presents itself within the whole system of SRD. It's difficult for me to consider, but I just assume that the explanation says it is because of largely of exit of some recipients. I don't know how many were there who exited, of which number I'm not sure. So maybe if Treasury could explain that. because other than that, then it would not be acceptable that there's simply underspending, because in a significant portion of the percentage has now found employment. I'm trying to read this with also the report of the rate of unemployment in the country of just above 30%, or about 31% or so. So, which is very much a significant percentage. Now I'm trying to read that with the explanation that we are getting. And then, Honorable Chair, you see the issue of presidential employment programs is a low-hanging fruit. We're not supposed to be really struggling around this program, because for job opportunities, creation of job opportunities, and more especially for young people. So I don't understand the reason that it will, be underfunded. Although I understand the Treasury says this problem should be addressed in the next time. But according to me, I see it being a low-hanging fruit, which we're supposed to take this opportunity, because it will impactfully contribute towards, creation of job opportunities for young people. So that has to be fast-tracked as soon as tomorrow, because we can't drop the ball from employment of 500 that big number that we have absorbed through these programs. So you can't drop the ball from. So in fact, we have to increase that to higher percentage or higher figures of employment job opportunities. And let me go to the issue of the collective bargaining. I think that matter, it has to be remain referred to relevant structure, and there has to be really a in-depth consultation with regard to that, especially around the issue of public service restructuring process. I just want to get clarity from Treasury. Is this headcount similar to the 2001 public service restructuring process, which resulted in what was referred to as a redundancy or supernumeracy in the departments, or it's one animal which is going to be different from the restructuring of 2001, which resulted in a number of disputes across the sector and created a lot of impasse. So I just want to know, is it that, or is it in a different context? Then if it is that one of 2001 similar, definitely one would really encourage that process that would unfold there. It needs a very deep consultation. I have a problem, Honorable Chair, with the statement of, maybe I'll get clarity, because there was a reference that some executives receive more. So unless maybe the presentation sought to say the executive, not some. Because if you say some, it means that those that receive more benefits than other executives. So perhaps that statement, for me, that it seems controversial. It needs to be, that understanding needs to be cleared. So which some executive and which are those that, because my understanding is that all the executives have similar benefits depending on their responsibility at the the first level or second level, deputy, the minister, etc. So, but all of them get the same similar benefits. But if there are some, perhaps something that I was not aware of. Yes. So on understanding, if I move further, Chair, on the second discussion, on the second presentation around the issues of underspending, I'm not sure when you say we want to deal with the issue of corruption. I want to link it with the first, my first minutes there on when I was referring to the 100 million. Then on the issue of underspending, Department of Justice, the aim is to shift to that amount, those amounts, that amount to SIU. Do we mean that now the SIU will do the work and then the DOG will short and not be able to prosecute? Is that what this shift means? Because I think at the end of the day, there will be the process from SEU that leads people now to go to DOJ and get prosecuted there. But then when on arrival there, they found the DOJ short of and cents, then it's a problem again. So unless I don't understand that movement, but if SIU is supported, it's good. But then it's bad if DOG underspends. But at the same time, Kutuza, DOG, again, it doesn't work. It reverses that process that we talked about of dealing with corruption. So I'm not sure what I'm talking about. Maybe I just need to be clarified, Treasurer. Yes, Chair, the post office needs to be supported, and one would really encourage that there has to be engagement with the post office in its future plans. Definitely, there has to be a deep engagement with their attempt to implement their new strategy, so that post office in a new restructured way, it is able again to reach out to ordinary people who depended on the service of the post office. On the SAA, on the state-owned enterprise, yes, one would welcome some improvements there, but I don't know why when there's one movement on the other, there's a problem on the others, like your Mengu. Similarly, there's a trend that moves to say, let them go to business rescue processes. So I'm referring to what would happen to Mengu and Ubuntu. So now, if there's a business process, there is still a staff that's supposed to be paid at Mengo or at SAA. So I'm not sure whether it's Treasury. What is the understanding of Treasury around that? Because when the business rescue takes over, there's no retrenchment or there is no a downsizing in terms of expenditure of personnel during that period. What we read or what has been explained before us, before the committee, that there will be a business rescue. And that is a lot of money which is implicated there. But at the same time, there's also the person which is supposed to be paid, because we won't encourage in any case people to lose their job. So I don't know how is that area being managed. And Now, on the underspending, Honorable Chair, I just want to check with Treasury why isn't there engagement with other big retailers so that our people are able to access even more easier their SRD grants in some of the retail shops, rather than making a long snail queues. So, because at some stage you know, some of these banks, you know, they react otherwise because their branches, they are far away from our people. So if there are supermarkets, retail places where they can quickly go and draw the SRD grant, let it be so. But that process would definitely need the will from the Department of Social Development to engage with the business chamber there around this issue. Chair, on the Treasury was not supposed to be appearing as number 4 of underspending. No, it will set a bad precedence. We're supposed to be out there. In fact, struggling to be any of these figures here. Now, if Treasury has enrolled as this department, we don't know who's going to call who to order now. So there has to be a drastic improvement in as far as Treasury is concerned, because we'll be setting a very bad precedence. Maybe we need to welcome that improvement from the previous record that we have as a committee around the Department of Water and Sanitation, because it was one department in the previous quarters where the underspending was now the order of the day. Although there's an improvement, there still has to be more, despite the 2 years assessment of, in as far as expenditure, financial expenditure is concerned, that Treasury has made that there's some significant improvement. It has to improve more. Why I'm saying more? Because of the recent incident of cholera in the country, the threat to human, it's a serious matter that has to be, to be eradicated. So despite this improvement, there is still more that the department can do to overcome these disasters, such as this one of cholera, which has emerged in the area of Hammanskraal. So, and the issue of vandalism of infrastructure, there has to be more collaboration with all the agents of the security, and even, I like to make an example about the involvement of this Council for Industrial Research, that there has to be collaboration with that institution to deal with the issue of security as well. Because if we don't involve such institution, who else can we involve with an improved mechanism of security of the infrastructure? So maybe Treasury has to engage with the department with regard to that. Honorable Chair, coming back to the issue of restitution, resettlement of or restitution claim, I think for us it's a long outstanding issue when we talk about the restitution of land claims. So it can't be at this stage really we're still singing this song that underspending it is being experienced in that particular area from the Department of Land and Rural Development. It's very, very much embarrassing, because if you check, land forms the basis of the economic recovery. If people have land, a piece of land, but then if we can't simply process land claims, restitution claims, it's like we're just playing with fire. So it is unacceptable that there is this understanding with regard to recent claims with regard to land restitution. So we definitely, the value general needs to tell us at some stage what is the problem. What is the problem of the value general with regard to that? It's really a problem. It's either there is no capacity, perhaps we need to know, because it can't be accepted that every year we sit a year and say, no, it is because slow claim process that is shaping that level. No, it's definitely not acceptable. Excuse this one. And definitely one would agree readily on the issue of defense and Stats South Africa, because in as far as one remember that Stats South Africa was complaining of being underfunded at some stage. But this acute growth of, over expenditure and the growth population, yes, I want to agree that population growth seem to have shaped, because our population is now well above 50. But that needs to be justified scientifically. That what has led to this overspending, this 200, almost, this overspending with this big, figure, including the defense. Definitely there has to be intervention there to establish what has resulted into such overspending. It needs to be justified. If it cannot be justified, yes, there has to be people or other institutions that comes in to investigate what has happened around that. So it will be welcomed if there could be such move as to what has actually led to this significant overspending in as far as the department is concerned. And we also note the improvement that has shaped within PRASA. I think there has to be continuous engagement in as far as PRASA is concerned, because it's a very important improvement, because our people who cannot reach out to the cheap transport, they are looking for a cheap transport to can be able to reach to their workplaces on time, and they are able to support their family. So, Honorable Chair, these are the only few comments that I want to make and propose. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Kaiso. Quickly, let me check. Honorable Red, do you have something you want to add? Honorable Lenzana?
I'm fine, sir. Thank you.
Honorable Lenzana? Honorable Kaiso?
Sorry, Chairperson,
No,
it is a bit scattered, but I was to say, no, I'm fine.
Okay. Honorable Tobias?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Any other honorable member? No. Okay, thank you. Let me start by welcoming the presentations, both as a response to the issues raised on the 2023 Appropriations Bill and the Q4 2022-23 expenditure report. Thank you very much, and also appreciate the report that you are making as far as the improvement in under expenditure is concerned. I think it's there. The numbers don't lie, and the only comment now would be yes, we should try to go towards an ideal state where there will be no underspending for obvious reasons. I think now the focus should be in the quality of that expenditure. Are we getting value for money, as Honorable Sheikh Imam will always say? but I think we need to appreciate that there is improvement in that regard. A question or a clarification: the 1 billion rand Department of Justice, what is it exactly? I see it talk about it being a surplus, and then some being moved somewhere. What exactly is happening? I think if we could just further clarify that. Look, the question of the funding of small businesses, and in particular, we've got a department, small business development. The explanation that we get that things are happening at IDC and so on, I must say that we don't agree with that. We've got a department and institutions which have got CEDA and CIFA, which must be funded. We have got a specific focus on small business. The fact that we are saying what is happening at IDC, I must say it's not acceptable to the committee. Let's fund small business. National Treasury, we are raising that, and it's not happening. In fact, it is let me try to find a softer word for this. It doesn't sell. NEF, we are not funding it, and yet we talk about as a question of Black economic empowerment. If I may ask, Dr. Ma, when was the last time NEF was funded by National Treasury, which is the funding of Black business, the only institution of democracy that was formed after 1994 with a specific focus on Black empowerment? It's not happening. CIFA and CEDA with a budget of less than 3 billion rand to look for SMMEs, it's also not enough. It's not helping. So I think you definitely say, if you read as far as how much we need in South Africa to really say we're making an impact on small business, we are far away from that. And the department which are perennially underspending, and small businesses are not being funded. I think we need to correct that. There's definitely misalignment from what we know, what other economies have done as far as development and job creation is concerned. So this one of pointing at IDC, definitely let's find another way of dealing with it. And there's a tax incentive for SMMEs. I don't think I've heard it. I don't know. There's somebody who can clarify that exactly. How does it work? There was a question of 4 DGs working on localization. I don't know from the platform exactly whether you can give us a progress as far as it is concerned. We got a report that DGs are working on localization, again for obvious reasons, as far as economic growth and ERP and employment creation is concerned. Then bank, I see that we have transferred money and blended finance and so on. But my question is, what are the implications for Land Bank and for the country in general for the failure to conclude the liability impasse at Land Bank? At Transnet, we had an oversight to Transnet, and obviously the question of locomotives, China thing, it's a big problem, and its impact on the economy. Do you know what the progress is? Because we learned that the Minister of Public Enterprises had gone to China to try and resolve this matter. Then on social development, the 6 billion rand underspending, I hear how you explain it. Basically, when you are saying that you are that's perfecting the system of making sure that people who are deserving are the ones who are getting this money. But when we're in the constituencies, I must share this with you, we find a lot of people who are saying they've been excluded from social development, especially the SRT grant, and their situation hasn't changed from what they were before. I don't know. So don't you think that perhaps we might have moved from one extreme to the other, where we're trying to correct something and the pendulum just swinged to another extreme? I just want to hear your comment. But there's this one which I think we'll agree with, and it has been raised by many people who come and before the committee, members of the public, but I think it's straightforward that the 350 rand has just been 350 rand. So in real terms, we'll agree that the buying power has decreased over the 3 years that we've been having. Why you have never looked at even just adjusting the 350 rand for inflation, despite the old pressures that are there as far as the cost of living is concerned. But thank you very much. Let's close by hearing you, where you can provide answers, where you must write to us. You know, we do allow that. Dr. Mampo.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm here.
Yes.
Thank you. So, Chair, there's a lot of questions, that the honorable members have raised, and I think these are critical questions. I think I'm going to go through some of the general ones, and then can I please ask the rest of the team to help with some of the responses? But, Chairperson, I mean, the issue of overspending on OPEX versus CAPEX, it's exactly the same when you look at the underspending. You want to encourage spending on capital investment and discourage operational spending. Unfortunately, for both of the overspending in Statistics South Africa and in the Defence Force, the spending was on operational expenditure. And Chairperson, we went to the Portfolio Committee on Defense, where we were presenting some of their spending patterns. And I think what we raised there is that this issue of rejuvenating the force is even more critical, because the continuous overspending on compensation of employees erodes the spending on capital investment, and they don't have enough money to maintain some of the machinery that they have. So it is something that we struggle with. So in the budget, a couple of budgets ago, we were protecting the allocations of infrastructure. Chair and honorable members, we try to make sure that when we do budget reductions or budget reprioritization, we protect the spending on capital, because we appreciate the fact that the more you spend on capital is the more you grow the economy. So unfortunately, even for this instant, the spending was not on capital expenditure, but it was on compensation of employees, and for the Statistics South Africa, it was on the census program. So it is something that we need to deal with. But with the Defence Force, the Portfolio Committee tasked us to work with them to try and assist and move them from this position that they had, where their compensation budget in terms of money is insufficient to cover the headcount. But all in all, you're right, Chairperson, it is better to spend on CAPEX. Even for underspending, we discourage completely underspending on capital projects, because we want to boost the economy. Then, Chair, the reason why we actually didn't bring a list of notorious departments is that for this year, the departments that are on the top 10, most of them were not on the top 10 last year. So there has been a change in how some departments do their procurement, in the change in some in the implementation times. So there has been a turnaround for most of the departments. Just to give you an example is the Department of Environmental Affairs, is Forestry and Fisheries and Environment. In the past, that department would underspend significant percentage of their budget, around 14% but this year they don't even feature in the list of underspending because the accounting officer implemented or introduced strategies that will help the department spend money efficiently, but also spend what has been allocated. So they improved a lot on capacity, they improved a lot on supply chain management, they improved a lot on their procurement processes. So basically, the notorious departments that we used to see in the past, there has been improvement in how they spend the money. So the ones that you see this time around, some of them would be part of the continuous underspending, that would be COGTA, to some extent the Department of Higher Education. But for COGTA, it is not that the department itself is underspending, because most of their allocations are transfers to local government. If there are decisions taken that we're going to recoup, or the state is going to recoup the rollovers that are not approved through the conditional through the equitable share, then the department won't transfer the full amount. So it's not because they are unable to spend, which is COGTA, but it's because of a government decision that has been taken. So for now, I looked at the list now, and basically what we are bringing to you is the departments that have been underspending. But if you look at the majority of the underspending is basically on the SRT grants because of improvements that we have. I'll come back to it, but also to because the equitable share was not fully transferred. So, Chairperson and honorable members, I think the issue of the SRT grant is a complicated one. So when we started with the SRT grant, what we basically said was, the decision that was taken at that time, when I say we, I mean government and parliament, was we need to top up, we need to introduce the grant because we closed the economy because of COVID. Therefore, almost everybody who did not have a job immediately qualified for the SRT grant because they were unable to work. The grant was further extended, and when we were extending the grant, it was extended without changing the criteria at that time. So what was there before, Chairperson and honorable members, is that the criteria for qualification was if you're unemployed, then you qualify. So we then had time to look at how can we effectively implement this grant. So when we then looked at, okay, what criteria do we have in the past that can help us make sure that we only give the grant to people who qualify? The criteria that was there was to do an income test. So, Chairperson, I think the manner in which we need to communicate this, as I said earlier, is that we use the wrong estimate to allocate money to the Department of Social Development, precisely because in the past 2-3 years of the grant being implemented, one, it was stopped at some point, but two, there were no stringent criteria in place. So what we didn't want to do, Chairperson, as government, is to come to Parliament and propose an allocation of a grant that may not be sufficient. Can you imagine the implications of the government being unable to pay the recipients because not enough money was allocated? Therefore, we then thought in making this estimate, let us look at the past years, allocate something similar while we put these criteria in the criteria in place. So basically, it's an issue of an estimated allocation rather than the state excluding people who really deserve the grant. So I think the key for me is the fact that because we didn't know how many people deserve the grant, because we didn't have this criteria before, we just used the previous estimate to deal with this. Chairperson, the issue of National Treasury underspending is a technical one for two of the areas that we've identified. So the first one is basically the fact that when lenders of guaranteed debt come to or ask government to fund them because the entity that we guaranteed can't defaulted, then it becomes a direct charge in the National Revenue Fund. So even if money is allocated to the National Treasury vote, because this comes from the National Revenue Fund, it means we could not spend that amount and transfer it to the land bank because those creditors have already been paid through the National Revenue Fund. So what it means is that Treasury's budget that was supposed to go to the land bank now just revert back to the National Revenue Fund. So it is not because Treasury could not spend the money, but it is because the creditors were already paid directly through the National Revenue Fund. Therefore, Treasury doesn't have to transfer the amount to the land bank for them to spend because the purpose of that amount has already been dealt with in the through the National Revenue Fund. But more critically, which is the second part of the underspending, is that Treasury is responsible for the post-retirement medical scheme that we manage. So basically, if there's an increase in mortality rate, then there's going to be a decline in the membership. There's going to be a decline in the number of people that receive the benefits. So it's not that Treasury was unable to spend the money. It was just the beneficiaries who were supposed to receive the money have passed on. So no one is receiving the money. So those are the two specific underspending that are not because of the inability for the Treasury to spend, but rather are circumstantial. But yes, Chairperson, the ones that we need to be careful of and we need to work on them would be the maintenance of the IFMS, but also concluding some of the programs in the OCPO. If it wasn't for these two, which is the direct charge, the land bank, and the post-retirement medical scheme, Treasury would not have been part of the list. So Chairperson, let me ask Marumo and then the Chief Directors in Public Finance and Ravesh's team just to quickly respond to the rest of the specific questions in their portfolios. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mampo. Just a few questions from me and clarities. And the first one, it's on the issue of the pension contribution that was raised by the first honorable member. I must indicate, I mean, the monies that get contributed are contributed on behalf of an employee, and in this case, it will be on behalf of a member. So the monies belongs to the member, but they are managed by the pension funds, which then appoints a board of trustees who will decide on how those funds are going to be managed and ensure that as and when they administer those funds, they then comply with the applicable legislations. But at the end, the money belongs to the employee or the member. Just in terms of the executive salaries, perhaps maybe the honourable member might have misunderstood me there. I think that there was a question that said that we must reduce the packages of politicians as well as the managers, and I was responding to that, and I indicated that in terms of the political office bearers, which means the politicians, members of parliament, as well as the executive, I mean, their remuneration is governed in terms of Section 219 of the Constitution, which requires that an independent body be established to determine the salaries and the benefits. And I was saying that that process is governed by that commission, which make recommendations to the president. So there is no differences in the salaries and benefits of the executive. So what I was saying is that in terms of the managers, I said that in some entities, and I was referring to public entities, that in some entities there have been discussion that perhaps remuneration of some senior managers in entities are probably exorbitant and they are not fair compared to the rest of the public service. And I was saying that, I mean, there is currently a review that will help us understand that and probably come up with a single remuneration framework for the public sector, especially relating to entities that receives or that relies on transfers from government. So the statement was in relation to the managers and not necessarily the executive. Just in terms of the restructuring as well, I mean, there was a question. The question was really around the headcounts, physical headcounts that government must conduct to identify ghost employees. And I was saying that, I mean, we agree that, I mean, that probably, I mean, we can embark on such initiatives because, and I indicated that it has been done in the past in some provinces. Limpopo did it through State SA. I think KZN appointed their service providers. And I was saying that this is some of the discussion that we are having with the DPSS to try and see if whether, I mean, similar exercises can be conducted just to make sure that verifications, I mean, we're able to verify, I mean, the people that are currently on PESAL. But I mean, the honorable member also made a suggestion that if there were to be any restructuring of the public service that government is considering, I mean, we need to learn from the experiences of the past. And I think I take that point that, I mean, whichever any plans that we might have to restructure the public service, I mean, we'll obviously consult widely with all the stakeholders and also learn from our past experiences and try to implement it in a manner in which will avoid, I mean, all these disputes and outcries from the people that might be affected. I think those were the three questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Maruma, and thanks, Chair. It's Rendani here. Let me deal with the questions raised by Honorable Traiso and yourself, Chair, in relation to a presentation emanating from the public hearings. I think that's slide 5. The Public Service Accountability Monitor came with 2 proposals. One, it says this committee must compel the National Treasury to review the SIU funding model so that it is funded in full through appropriation. That was recommendation number 1 by Public Service Accountability Monitor. 2, they are saying that given the underspending in justice, funding should be shifted to the SIU so that they capacitate themselves in dealing with corruption. So those are the 2 recommendations by the Public Service Accountability Monitor. And we are saying in March 2022, National Treasury approved the retention of 921 million for that money to be retained by SIU so that it can deal with its cash flow problems during the course of the year. That's number 1. Number 2, we are saying that if Public Service Accountability Monitor says because there is underspending, money should be shifted to SIU. It is a case of shifting the funds if there are savings on the justice vote. If it is a function shift, then it is something else. It means that everything associated with that function will migrate to the SIU. So, but here we're only speaking about shifting of funds as a result of savings on the justice vote. So that's the issue. It emanates from the proposals by the Public Service Accountability Monitor. But we are saying that from where we are sitting, and if justice feels that there are savings and there is a need to capacitate the SIU, there are legal provisions to allow for that. It is simply shifting of funds from justice as a result of the savings, not shifting of a function. So if we are shifting a function, it therefore means that even personnel and everything associated with that function will migrate to SIU. But in this particular case, it is only the shifting of funds in order to capacitate the SIU. And this is the recommendation that emanates from the Public Service Accountability Monitor. The other issue raised, I think Mampo has elaborated on it. It's on defense. I'll end here, Chair. Thanks.
Maybe I could add a little bit further, Honourable Chairperson, on the SRD grant. So just firstly to note that SASSA is, of course, the organisation managing the grant, and under social development, and they have very detailed processes of assessing beneficiaries. They also have a very detailed appeal process. So there are many thousands of people, in fact, hundreds of thousands of people who have also gone through appeal processes. So, questions around underspending are best put to the relevant departments and entities that are managing those programs, because they need to account for their spending on those programs. But just to respond to some of Mr. Ayuso's question, some of the numbers that he asked around. So firstly, the maximum number of people that ever received the SRD grant was around 10.8 million. The current number of recipients is 8.2 million. But the big difference between the period where the 10.8 million peaked was that at that period there was not the bank means tests as they exist today. So the bank means tests are, they're quite thorough, and they check whether people have got accounts across a range of different banks. The testing is just a lot more thorough. Now, our assessment of the numbers of people who could ultimately qualify for this grant, if the grant were made permanent, is between 16 and 17 million people. And that's partly why I mentioned earlier when I presented that if this grant is made permanent, that it could reach 130 billion by 2030, because the current 8.2 million recipients, it's interesting to compare, actually, Chairperson, to other countries where, for example, in Spain, there's about 1 million beneficiaries on a similar grant, and in many other countries. So, potentially these numbers, if the grant continues, could continue to grow quite strongly in the years ahead, from the current 8 million up to around 16 million. Chair, there's not a limitation currently there's not a limitation on funding on the grant, so that as certain people leave, new people come in. Every individual is assessed by SASSA on their merits. They fill out forms, they explain their income is checked, they cross-checked against the UIF database, against the PERCEL database, against the Home Affairs database, many other databases. On the question about, well, shouldn't the grant be raised closer to the food poverty line? So, yes, we could do that, Chair, but then we would have to add several billion more to the grant. So, and one needs to decide within the fiscal framework that this committee has approved, where those funds would come from. Again, as I mentioned earlier this morning, if by 2030 we increase the grant to 70% of the food poverty line, that's going to cost 130 billion and will require tax increases to do that. So yes, the grant is too low. It needs to be increased, but there have to be funds to do it. And currently, with the wage agreement not being funded, we have a 37 billion shortfall on personnel. So there are a lot of shortfalls in many areas. Back to you, or the next speaker, Mampo.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think if there's no more responses from public finance, then from a state and company perspective, I will just respond to the questions on SAA, more particularly Mango. I think the Honorable Kaisa asked a question around the employees of Mango and funding thereof. So basically, of the 819 million that's been provided to Mango, 420 million has been earmarked for salaries, the business rescue plan, and voluntary service packages. I think the latest details, I think that it will be best to engage with the Department of Public Enterprises for further details around employees, as we're not aware at this stage, seeing that it's still under business rescue. I think the other question was from you, Honorable Chair, was just around the Transnet status in terms of the locomotives and the outcomes of the meeting in China. Chair, we are not aware of the outcomes of those meetings with the Minister of Public Enterprises, but what we can report on is that in terms of the conditions of the allocation of 2.9 billion special appropriation, one of the conditions there was that Transnet and DPE report monthly on the rehabilitation of the long-standing out-of-service locomotives and the impact thereof on volume. So we will wait that report, and in the next quarterly meeting, we'll provide an update to you on that. Chair, I think that's it from my side, and I hand over to Lefenza, who will help you respond to questions on Land Bank.
Thank you, Ravesh. I think there were two questions on the Land Bank. The first one was, are we able to say the transfers to the Land Bank do really reach the beneficiaries? Chair, to say yes, I'll not be honest. I don't think the transfer really reached the beneficiaries the way they were supposed to. And the reason being that if you look at the growth of the loan book, of the Land Bank loan book would realize that the loan books will realize that the commercial book was far bigger than the development book. And the growth of the development book was basically not at par with how we expected it to grow. And I guess the biggest reason given by the Land Bank were basically saying, they were actually saying the funding model of the Land Bank was mainly dependent on the debt from the capital market. And that's the reason why a larger portion. And this is the same lenders were not willing to support the development. So they wanted their money to be used for commercial business. So that's the reason why they see the growth of the development book being slow. Or remember that the last capitalization we made to the Land Bank was around 2013, if I'm not wrong. So, and over between 2013 and now, there's been very little that has been happening in the Land Bank by not providing the necessary capital for development, by the development, the way we expected it. Yeah.
And the second question, which was directly asked by the chair, what are the implications and what are the implications of not concluding liability solution? It can be answered in two ways. The first one to the land bank. It basically means the land bank is not able to do business the way it's supposed to be because they are not being able to give out loans as they expected, since the lenders still for the land bank. Basically, one would say the cap belongs to the lenders because of the cross default, technically so. And they are limiting the way land bank can actually do business. So the sooner this is concluded, it will be better for the bank